Thor Ragnarok, directed by Taika Waititi, starring Chris Hemsworth, Tom Hiddleston, Kate Blanchett, Idris Elba, Jeff Goldblum, Tessa Thompson, Carl Urban, Mark Ruffalo, Anthony Hopkins, and Benedict Cumberbatch. Those lists of casts are always so long in terms of the Marvel movies. It was the film that completely reinvigorated the character of Thor and made him really, really exciting. The backstory at the time was that initially Ragnarok was meant to be this serious, dark film, much like The Dark World, which came before it. And by that time, Hemsworth himself was kind of tired of the character. He was openly talking about, wanting out, that this was the last movie in his contract and just wanted to be gone. And then politics in Marvel changed, and instead of a tightly controlled studio producers, the movie was given more into the hands of in this case, a very individual and unique director. And apparently, working with Taika was just such a blast for everybody involved that Hemsworth himself now says he can just play Thor for as long as Marvel needs him to. And the fourth installment is currently being shot in Australia, again with Taika Waititi at the helm. Crucially, though, this great experience of the people involved in the movie's creation also translated to just a really solid film. I think it's by far the best rated Thor movie thus far, for good reason, and also one of the more cherished ones in the entire MCU, not least because of its comedic nature and colorful energy. So the story picks up with Thor fighting a fire demon named Surtur, who is supposedly going to cause Ragnarok, if allowed to, the end of Asgard as a planet. So he beats Surtur after going back to Asgard itself. Thor discovers that Loki replaced Odin, as we learned at the end of the previous film, and the two brothers end up going to Earth to find their father. That leads to the revelation that they actually have an older sister named Hela, the goddess of death, who soon comes to take what is hers. Thor and Loki end up on a scrap planet named Sakaar, and they kind of have to fight and figure out their way back to Asgard to save the world from destruction and to stop Hela. So this description is admittedly fairly dry, and based on it, you could still very well expect another dreary movie like The Dark World. Reality is that Ragnarok is completely different. It's extremely comedic, and apparently like 80% of the dialogue or something was improvised. It looks amazing from the rich color palette, insanely good cinematography, with some of the shots looking straight up like paintings. For example, the Hela versus Valkyrie sequence, the costumes and the set design, that looks properly crazy for a space setting like this. But what the movie does really right is it gets the character of Thor, perhaps in the best way up until that point in the movies. It builds him as this slightly arrogant, slightly goofy hero with huge heart and courage, who is also riddled with a lot of self-doubt, who still needs to find that ability to believe in himself, to really tap into his powers and not rely on others or on his hammer. I think his journey here is quite amazing. Secondly, he's surrounded by a great cast of supporting characters. Loki, obviously fantastic as always, and their relationship together is great in this film. Kate Blanchett as Hela has the time of her life, just going over the top all the time and chewing scenery left and right. The whole dynamic of Thor, Hulk, and Thor Banner is hilarious and fantastic at the same time. All of their scenes together are probably my favorites in the film. Although I still maintain that if the movie managed to keep Hulk a secret instead of putting him in the trailer and on the posters, it would have made for such an amazing surprise for the audiences. Tessa Thompson, super likable as Valkyrie. Jeff Goldblum is just Jeff Goldblum in We're Close, and I loved it. Even the small appearances like Cumberbatch and Hopkins are cool at bringing this kind of unexpected gravity to an otherwise very light and humorous film. And here's my slight complaint that I think prevents the movie from being just excellent in my eyes. I think that there are certain points where the inclusion of jokes and humor takes away from the seriousness of the moment. For the most part, the humor is fantastic, but I just would have liked it if Taika restrained himself just a little bit more. The best example is probably Asgard's destruction at the end. I felt it could have been a really emotional moment and a send-off after 3 movies, but it's just immediately undercut by a silly joke. So yeah, I think it's not perfect in that regard, but even so, I have to commend it for being a very entertaining movie in its own right, and also a huge turning point for the character of Thor in the MCU. I think the film really reinvigorated and rediscovered him. It made the cast more excited about characters again, and crucially, it also made wider audiences fall in love with Thor even more than before, which Marvel then capitalized on pretty strongly in Avengers Infinity War. And probably more movies to come, as we know for sure. Thor: Love and Thunder is currently in production in Australia. So, to that, I will simply say, long live the king.